Hello MMA fans and welcome back to MMA Crypt Fighting Talk. For today's show, we are going 3 rounds post UFC Fight Night 34 review, featuring me, Gregory Stone, Brian Hunt and Greg Marshall. Okay, let's kick off the show with round 1, guys. Referee problems on UFC Fight Night 34. I'd like to start with a 2-point deduction from Kyung Ho Kang. Kang landed several 12-6 downward elbows to his opponent, Shinichi Shimizu, while trapped in a triangle. What's your thoughts on the 2-point deduction, guys? Do you think it was the correct call? You know, we don't see many 2-point deductions in MMA. That question is for you first, Greg.
I thought it was harsh. It was obviously wrong what he was doing. The ref made the right call in stopping the fight at the point to let the other guy recover. But 2 points is a bit much. He'd never warned him. He'd never give him a 1-point deduction. To go straight to 2, I thought it was bad. 1 point I'd have been happy with. I'd have probably even been happy if he just warned him to start with. But 2 points was way too harsh, I thought.
Brian, do you agree with Greg?
No, I think Greg's full of shit. But I've gone back and forth on this. It's a clear foul. The 12-6 is such an obvious motion, and it's actually an awkward kind of motion to throw that elbow. It's not a natural flowing thing, so you really have to train yourself to kind of throw that elbow. So you should really know that you're throwing an illegal elbow. If it was an illegal target, like he accidentally hit the back of the head versus the side, I think I'd have more issues with the 2-point because, well, people move, shit changes where you might not hit exactly what you're aiming for. But that strikes, it's an obvious strike that you're throwing. It'd be like, okay, kicks are illegal and you throw a kick. Well, okay, that's clearly a foul. That's how I feel about that downward elbow. It is such a unique elbow. I mean, I've trained that elbow, and it never feels quite right. So it takes quite a bit to throw it, and I just don't know if they knew the rules. So I would have been upset if it was a warning only because they both landed. I think 1 point would probably have been fine in a 10-point system because that's pretty much calling the round a draw. And then I start thinking about, well, he threw it twice, and they're both fouls, so maybe 1 point per foul. And I have a harder time making that a legitimate cause, but they're both good elbows. I mean, they both landed, and one of them cut him or kind of braised him up just a little bit. And so I'd have been happy with one. I'm not upset with the 2 points. I think I'd have been more upset with just a warning over the 2 points, though. So that's kind of my take on it. Is 1 would have been ideal. 1 point would have been ideal, but two didn't upset me just because it's such an obvious illegal strike.
We then moved on to the next bout of the night, where 12-6 elbows played a major part in this fight. Luis Dutra Junior was disqualified due to several illegal elbows to the back of the head of his opponent, Kichi Kunimoto. The DQ was a good call as there were 2 rule infractions, and his opponent could not continue the fight. But the thing that stood out to me on the main card was the lack of communication due to the language barrier between the fighters and the referees. We had 2 illegal elbows in 2 fights in a row, and when Shimizu was kicked in the balls, I don't know Eastern Net guys, but the referee was talking to him in English saying, he didn't kick you in the balls, and Shimizu was like nodding like, yes, okay. Like, he didn't have no fucking clue what the referee was saying to him, you know what I mean? Do you think the illegal elbows was due to the fighters not understanding the referees for the event? As the refs go into, the back before the fight and explain the rules? Clearly in the fight there was problems due to language barrier also. That question is for you first, Greg.
I think there was definitely problems with the language barrier. None of them seemed to know what they were saying to each other. Other than that, was the elbows down to the language barrier? No, not at all. Everyone should either knows the rules or should know the rules. You can't step in the cage and not know the rules, so that's the language barrier can't have any part to play in that. Again, the DQ, I don't think it was stopped because of the downward elbows, though. It was because he landed blows to the back of the head and the guy couldn't carry on. That was the reason of the disqualification. If the guy had got back to his feet, there would have been a points deduction and they would have carried on, I think. So I don't think it was down to the elbows being downward elbows or that per se.
Brian, do you think the illegal elbows was due to the fighters not understanding the referees for the event?
Well, as Blue said, they should know this ahead of time. At one point I thought, well, typically in the past for the Asian MMA scene, there were no elbows. I don't think elbows were legal in Pride. I don't think they were legal in Dream. And I don't know if they ever became legal over there on their standard fights. So I was like, well, maybe the Asian MMA guys just weren't used to throwing elbows. And as soon as they're like, okay, elbows are okay, they thought all elbows were okay. But the DQ guy, I believe, is a Brazilian guy. So it's, and most of them some of them had fought in the UFC before. But again, the rules are pretty simple. It's no 12-6. So I don't know if it's language barrier. The guy that got DQ'd, I mean, his was, I thought, bad elbows and bad targets. So where he hit the guy was bad, and how he threw him was bad. So I'd have to watch it again to make sure if they were truly 12-6. But he didn't come close to winning that fight. He screwed up so bad, and there was 3 or 4 of those things that landed. And from what I remember hearing Big John talking about it, the actual rule for the 12-6 was more for the target, for attacking the spine and attacking the brainstem. Typically, like when the wrestler's trying to go in, they don't want you targeting the spine with the elbow. So, and it's that 12-6 motion that is an ideal target from that if you're up against the fence, back against the fence, and somebody's trying to do the double leg on you. So that was the purpose of the 12-6, was just to protect the spine, the brainstem. Again, going out of memory, which it gets a little bit faded over the years. But it's not the actual elbow itself. I mean, you should be able to do a 12-6 to the thigh, to the shoulder, to anything. The 12-6 being an illegal elbow is a fucking joke. It's just the ideal target of the 12-6 is typically the spine. So, and that's why it became illegal. But that's not valid. I mean, it was stupid. And I've heard Big John say that it's stupid that it became illegal because of that. But it is. It's part of the rules, and it's something that they have to learn to deal with. And they clearly did not in this fight. But where does it go? Okay, well, 11-5 is okay. 1-7 is okay. But that was clearly a 12-6. That's going to get difficult. It's really, really going to get difficult. So,
but they're doing set time for dinner, though.
Yeah, exactly. And if you're on top of the guy and you're in his mount and you're throwing an elbow, it could be starting at 12 o'clock and coming straight down to 6 o'clock. So that's still a 12-6. It's just not the over-under type of elbow versus straight down. As far as the motion of the strike, it's still a 12-6 elbow. But it's not that kind of reverse hooking elbow or whatever the fuck you want to call it. So I don't know. It's a tough one. It's just one of many issues with the rules in MMA.
Okay, we then moved on to another strange incident involving a referee's decision. Kawajiri put Sean Soriano to sleep via a naked choke. After Sean Soriano tapped out, it looked like a blatant tap to me, guys, as the ref was in a good position. You know, he was standing right above them. Greg, do you think that was a bad call by the referee to miss the tap? You know, it looked like a tap to the broadcast team also. They was mentioning it.
Absolutely. I was jumping at my seat shouting, "Stop the fucking fight." I thought it was the most obvious tap I thought you could ever see. And the ref just stood back and did nothing. Referees like that shouldn't be involved in the sport. That's what they're there for. They're there to see these things. And when it's not as if he was tapping underneath him or tapping over something or he had to look under something. It was right in front of him. Right there, right in front of him. There's no reason for a referee to miss it. That was worse than the Josh Burkman one. Yeah, that was much worse because the ref was standing literally right in front of them. It was terrible.
He hasn't took as much flack as what Steve Mazzagatti did either. I've not even seen one fucking comment about the referee so far. And Mazzagatti was blowing up everywhere about Mazzagatti.
To be fair, I think that's mainly probably because hardly anyone's seen this. if I'm being brutally honest, I don't think many people have seen this, and I think it might get brought to light more. I think it might get brought to light more. Because Dana White should be crucifying that boy Percival for that.
Yeah, exactly. He's out in the press the media scrum afterwards, fucking with an ad on about fucking Mazzagatti. You know, he should be in the game and whatnot.
That wasn't even in his own event. That was in another organisation's event, and this one happened in his event. And I must admit, I think I remember the last event in Australia, the Hunt Bigfoot one. I thought that Percival looked a bit ropey then too. I think he's a bad referee. Like.
Well, Brian, we touched upon this last night a little bit. We spoke prior to this show. Did you think it was a bad call by the referee to Mr. Tap?
I actually didn't. I didn't think. I was actually just as upset the other way because obvious tap. I mean, yes, he let go of defending, and then kind of went to a tapping motion. But I shouldn't say tapping. Tap. There was no plural tap. It was kind of let go and come back up. But I don't. You're always grabbing. You're always repositioning. I don't know if he's letting go then repositioning. So I always want to see a clear 2 to 3. Let me know. When we used to grapple, that's when I would target is like, okay, a single tap. If I feel it, I'm going to let go. And if it's valid or not, then we'll address it later. Not a big deal. If you're tapping me multiple times, that's a fucking clear tap that you're about to go out. You know when you're about to go out most of the times. You can feel the darkness coming. I always call it like you're walking into a cave backwards. Whenever I'd get choked out, that's the feeling, is walking into a cave backwards. You feel the light, the darkness coming up from behind you. Anybody that's trained this stuff regularly, you've gone to that position, in my opinion. Maybe not. Hell, I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. But you should know when you're getting ready to go out. And when that happens, tap. I mean, not a singular tap. Tap 2 to 3 times. Let them know. Bam, bam, bam. Make it clear. So, no, I actually disagree with you guys. I didn't think it was a completely obvious tap. And if that was, then GSP tapped. And then every time somebody lets go, then holds back on, that's a tap too. I want to see 2 to 3 clear motions of tapping. It's not called, well, it is called tap out, but I refer to it as tapping out. So
Brian, I've not even given my comment to the listeners yet. You've put the spoiler out, man. You said you don't agree with us. You've gone off our conversation yesterday.
Yes.
You've gone off our conversation yesterday. You've answered my question for me.
Maybe you're gonna change your mind. I don't know. But I don't. I want to see tapping. I don't want to see tap. There was a movie Taps back in the years. I really enjoyed it. But in MMA, I want to see tapping. I want to see it plural. So, but I'd be curious if the guy remembers and if he says I tapped and they didn't do it. Brock Lesnar tapping against Frank Mir. That was bad refereeing. That's what I consider bad, when he's tapping, looking at the Maz, saying kind of, help me, motherfucker. And Maz is like, are you sure you really want to tap out to this motion? Yes. I think he's going to break my fucking leg.
I swear Steve Mazzagatti had a problem with Brock Lesnar. He took a fucking point straight away, and then he fucking let him stay in that knee bar for longer than what he's supposed to have done. I bet he's thinking, fucking pro wrestler coming over, you're going to get your ass whooped and sort of lesson and go back. I think that's what he was thinking. There was some bad calls in there. There was no need for some of that stuff.
So,
well, anyway, for you listeners who don't know what, go on, Brian.
What do you think on this, Dirty?
Well, now you mention it. Personally, I think it was a bad call. I really do. I think Percival fucked up big time, and hopefully he comes out and admits it. He was stood right over the guys. There was a clear fucking tap. 3 times he tapped, at least 3 or 4. He went do, and he stopped because he was fucking going out. That's why he stopped tapping. He didn't stop because of finger. He was going out because literally about 2 seconds after that, you could see he just went. His eyes went. Your eyes go funny when you go out, and it was horrible for me. Absolutely horrible. Okay, moving on to round 2. Tatsuya Kawajiri versus Sean Soriano. Now, we just discussed the ending to this bout, guys. This was 2 big-name featherweights making their UFC debuts. I'd like to ask you how you rated their UFC debut performances in this round. Starting with the runner-up, Sean Soriano. Brian, what did you make of Sean Soriano's debut performance at UFC Fight Night 34?
He started off good. He had a good game plan of trying to stay busy, trying to stay away from the guy. I was almost concerned that Kawajiri is going to just look very one-dimensional. It's like, okay, you're just going to try to lay on the guy for 5 minutes until you. And I was wrong, but the guy was Sean was staying busy. He had the right fight plan. I'd like to see more of him against maybe a better opponent that's not going to ground him so aggressively and fairly decisively. So he has potential. He has potential. I liked his movement. He was throwing good strikes. He did some damage standing, but once it hit the ground, he was out of his league. But I think most people are going to be out of their league against this guy. So it was a good showing and a loss.
Greg, what did you make of Sean Soriano's debut performance at UFC Fight Night 34?
First up, I like the way you call him the runner-up. I prefer to call him the loser.
Come on, Greg, let's be nice to him. He put in a spirited effort. Now, if he got his ass whooped, then he'd be the loser.
Getting past that, though, I don't know. It's difficult to tell. Kawajiri gassed really bad in the fight. And the guy wasn't able to take advantage of that at all in the second round. He just ended up in the same position he was at the end of the first round pretty quickly. So it's tough to make a call on him, really. Obviously, Kawajiri's had a bit of a reputation outside of the UFC for a long time, but he's getting on a bit now as well. Soriano came in, 8-0. He was coming into the fight, I think.
Yeah, I think he was
with a bit of a reputation that he could be a prospect.
Yeah.
He could be a prospect, a really good one, and he came up against a top level guy. Not for me though. I think he was a bit disappointing once he did get taken down. Once he got controlled, he didn't really have any answer for it at all. So I'll need to see him in another fight to make any kind of call on the guy.
Well, that's the thing, because anyone who gets grappled with Kawajiri, you can't really make a fair assessment on him, can you, really? So, yeah, I sort of agree with that. For me, I do think he has a bright future in the sport, and hopefully in the UFC. It is a pretty stacked division, so you never know. It depends how the UFC match him, for me, really, on his future. I actually picked him to get the upset win over Kawajiri, but he certainly has nothing to be ashamed of, in my opinion. He put on a very solid performance against Kawajiri. As far as his skill set goes, though, he's a fantastic striker. You know, you sort of expect that with him coming from the Black Zillions. They've got Tyrone Spong over there, and Anthony Johnson, he's a fairly good striker. Rashad Evans has shown very vast improved boxing over the years. He had some decent wrestling and positioning sense as well. Obviously, he did get out grappled on the ground from Kawajiri, but before that, and I've seen his previous fights, he's very good and very strong in the wrestling up against the cage, and his sprawling is pretty good. He's very quick, creates very good angles as well in grappling situations. It's pretty much the same as Greg, really. You know, he came up against an experienced foe in Kawajiri for his first fight. I think that was, you know, sort of thrown to the wolves in that fight a little bit. It's not obviously shows how much the UFC thought of him to put him as a co-main event against someone like Kawajiri. So time will tell. He's trained at Black Zillions, so he can only improve. So okay, moving on to Tatsuya Kawajiri's debut. This was long awaited for some MMA fans. Brian, what did you make of Kawajiri's debut performance?
A good showing against an unproven guy. I think he's going to look old, slow, and one-dimensional against some of the better talent in the UFC. He did nothing to set up his takedowns, really. He walked in, 8 punches until he kind of got a hold of the guy. But, God, he looked extremely one-dimensional trying to get the takedown. He just didn't set it up. I'm gonna muscle the guy out, just muscle. And I didn't think it was going to work for a while. I was like, oh, God, this is all you're going to try to do? This guy's kind of lighting me up on his feet. And, but it eventually worked, and that kind of surprised me. But I think he's going to be grossly exposed by the multiple dimensions of MMA that the sport has evolved to. It's he's going to kind of look like Aoki in an wrestling match. Just great. If it goes to jiu-jitsu, great, but he's going to look one-dimensional, and we need to see more of him. Don't know how much nerves are playing into this. He should be very used to being in front of a big eye, but not overly impressed. But again, I don't know exactly what Sean has to offer either. Maybe they're both better than we thought, and so it's a fairly even fight, or maybe not. So time will tell. I definitely want to see both of those guys in the UFC again.
Greg, what did you make of Kawajiri's debut performance?
Same really. It's difficult to judge what he was like because you don't really know much about Soriano. I thought the UFC would have been better pairing him against somebody that you kind of know, that you've seen fighting in the UFC a couple of times, to kind of let you know exactly where he's positioned in the division. Obviously, he pretty much won the fight easily once he got it to where he wanted it. The biggest thing for me was how easily he tired. Like when the fight finished, he was absolutely done. If it went to a third, I don't see him even getting to the third round. I think he'd have retired on his seat because he looked absolutely gone. And for him to compete in the UFC, there's no way he can keep up that kind of level.
Hey Brian, did you see Kawajiri's post-fight speech? And if so, what did you make of it?
I did not, so I thought nothing of it.
I'll throw that to you then, Greg.
Unprepared motherfucker.
Greg, did you see his post-fight speech?
Yes, I thought it was amazing, and it was a great honor. Love to the sport. How's that?
It was actually quite funny because he seemed to be trying to make a real point of shouting something to someone, but you couldn't understand a word he was saying. I think he was trying to speak in English.
Fucking Brian Stan kept fucking stealing the microphone from him. And then when that Kawajiri went rambling whatever he rambled, fucking his shit translated, never even told us what it was.
Well, that's why I think he was trying to speak in English. I think he was actually trying to speak in English. Because there was no translation.
Then Brian Stan was like, he didn't even re-ask him the question, he moved on to another question. I think he must have asked him 3 questions that never got answered, and he didn't even re-ask him.
I think the main thing was that he mentioned Dana and Lorenzo. That's all I could really pick up from it. And then the one bit the translator did manage to translate was that he wanted a better opponent than Soriano, and then he must have realised that wasn't a good point. And he goes, but Soriano was really good though.
I noticed that the crowd went.
He backtracked pretty quickly on it.
Well, back onto his debut performance. You know, he looked a little too desperate for the takedown at the start of the fight, as you guys mentioned. I wouldn't expect that from him, to be honest with you, because I've seen previous fights against like Gilbert Melendez where he fucking went toe to toe with Gilbert Melendez, and they traded leather hard. You know, he's pretty reckless when he gets in there. That's one of the reasons why I picked Soriano, because Soriano's an accomplished striker, and I felt like he was good on the takedown defense and scrambles. I felt like Kawajiri would have stood for him for a lot longer than what he did, and he would have paid the price for it. Other than that, really, he just played to his strengths. You know, he took the fight where he needed and just put on a solid performance against a young up-and-coming fighter. You know, obviously needed the fucking win bonus by the looks of things, because he certainly went for it. Now, this was the co-main event for UFC Fight Night 34. Brian, did the bout live up to the billing as a co-main event, in your opinion?
Yeah, because sure. I enjoyed the Max Holloway versus Will Chope, I think his name is, fight much better.
Yeah.
That was a much more exciting fight.
That was 2 Muay Thai kickboxers, so I had a feeling that'd be pretty decent. Yeah,
so in that aspect, I mean, what was it, the second best fight of the night? No, absolutely not. But it was the biggest second name, so it had to be the co-main event. It's just I just didn't have a good feel for the flow of the card. So it was the second fight I watched, but I watched the main card first. So it's
Brian, don't be scared of the Kawajiri trolls. Just tell the truth. Kawajiri let the side down. He fucked up. He made it boring and shit.
No, he fought how he fights. He's a decent wrestler. He's a one-dimensional guy. I think he fought to win. His best chance of winning was out wrestling this guy and not standing with him. So he fought a smart fight. It just I didn't get a good feel for the whole flow of the card, and I can't blame that on the UFC or the card itself, just for the format that I watched it. And there were several things that bothered me. I'll cover one of them in the next round, but sure, it was a decent main event fight because of the names, and they can't all work out the way you want them to.
Greg, did the bout live up to the billing as a co-main event, in your opinion?
I don't think it's really kind of relevant, because if you're thinking co-main event, you're thinking usually along the lines of a big fight. Well, when you consider the previous event to this, you had Rousey Tate as the co-main.
Whoa, yeah.
It's difficult to compare them because this obviously isn't a card that was going to feature any big names. You wouldn't even really say the main event wasn't main event worthy. If you're brutally honest about it. But again, these events in Asia are going to be more developmental than actual proper events. So co-main event, yeah, it was worthy because Kawajiri was in it and he's a big name in Asia. Other than that, you could have picked any one of the other 8 fights to be co-main event for all they were worth, really.
Okay, moving on to our third and final round and the main event for UFC Fight Night 34. Tarec Saffiedine versus Hyun Gyu Lim. Finally, the last ever Strikeforce welterweight champion, Tarec Saffiedine, made his UFC debut at UFC Fight Night 34. Greg, what did you make of Tarec Saffiedine's performance against Hyun Gyu Lim?
I'd have preferred it to have been against Ellenberger, so you could get a kind of true reflection of how he is. Lim was still a bit of an unknown quantity, even though I did pick him to win the fight. I still think he's
not really one.
Yeah, I still think he was a bit of an unknown quantity, so you weren't really too sure where Saffiedine stacked up. But the biggest thing I took away from the fight was that Saffiedine doesn't have any killer instinct at all. He was happy to cruise through the fight once he kind of got control of the fight. There's plenty of times he could have finished Lim. He like an unusual way to finish a fight, but even on the ground, he should have been elbowing and punching the leg, because Lim's leg was gone. He could hardly stand. Yet Saffiedine kept just trying to get control, keep control of the top position rather than look for a way to win the fight. That said, his leg kicks are brutal, and he'll beat many guys in the division with those kicks easily.
Brian, what did you make of Tarec Saffiedine's performance against Hyun Gyu Lim?
Good, but if you'd have told me this fight's going to go the distance after midway into the third round, I'd have said you're stoned. There's no way. So,
no, that's riddle.
Yeah, I agree with Greg that where's the killer instinct? I mean, Lim was done. He had victim written all over him, and yet he couldn't finish it. He just, great heart for Lim, but the dude was done. He was. There's no way it should have got out of the fourth round. It shouldn't have, and I don't. It turned into what looked like a training session, and that's sad to see in an MMA fight. It was a training session. Somebody that wanted to get some minutes, get some rounds built up, and. That's unfortunate. Saffiedine, he looks legit. He looked like a freaking lightweight in that fight, though. I mean, Lim was a giant. I was like, oh, God, and I had to look at the numbers. Is Saffiedine a tiny welterweight, or is Lim just a freaking giant? Well, Saffiedine's not tiny. He's 5'10", 170, and Lim's freaking 6'2", making that weight, and he just went 25 minutes. So that's I look forward to Lim because of the heart. That was really nice to see the heart, but Saffiedine's legit. He looks pretty well rounded. Great leg kicks, and he didn't look particularly tired after 25 minutes. I know he's got a couple of 25-minute fights, I think, in him now, but it's good to see. It's another good person in a fairly deep division.
Okay, guys, we've seen his UFC debut now. Who would you put Tarec Saffiedine up against next if you were Zuffer management? That's for you first, Greg.
Well, looking at who there is rather than who I'd put him up against next, there's a couple of there's one guy in particular who's without a fight and he's a bit injured at the moment, Matt Brown. That would be a reasonable fight, but the one I'd prefer to see him fight next, because Saffiedine's probably going to be ranked about 7 or 8 now, I would think. I'd like to see him fight the winner of Lombard Shields. I think Lombard would, because I think if Lombard wins, if it's Shields, it's not worth the fight. But if Lombard wins, I'd like to see Lombard Saffiedine.
You had to bring up Jake Shields, didn't you, Greg? When Brian's on the show today.
The thing is, if Shields beats Lombard, I think Shields should be close to getting a title shot, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, I don't think Brian's going to like this.
Not that I like him, but he deserves it.
Not that I like him.
He wins his fights, and that's the thing.
He's fucking blacklisted on Fighting Talk, isn't he?
We won't be doing Jake Shields sponsors Fighting Talk.
Yeah.
Brian, who would you put Tarec Saffiedine up against next if you were Zuffer management?
Blue mentioned the name earlier, Ellenberger. Is Ellenberger scheduled to fight anybody?
Well, he was meant to be fighting Saffiedine, but he pulled out, and that's why Lim was fighting him.
So, I mean, how long out is Ellenberger out for?
I don't think it's long. I think he was trying to angle for a fight on the next pay-per-view, 169. So I think it was just a small injury that caused him to pull out.
That's who I schedule him up against. I mean, because from what I'm seeing, I don't think Ellenberger's scheduled anybody. Everybody else is. I mean, the next free guy is Brown, and I think he's hurt for quite some time. And then everybody else down, Campman, I don't think scheduled to fight.
That'll be good. Campman.
Campman had a couple of losses though.
Yeah, so I'm good with Ellenberger. I think that's make the fight happen for good this time. And Saffiedine he got hurt a little bit at the end, but he should be fine to go a pretty quick turnaround, a couple of months. So that just seems to work right now. It's Ellenberger's in that 7-ish club as far as ranking, and I think Saffiedine's probably approaching the top 10 now. So call it 10 versus 7. I'd sign off on that.
I have to go with Greg. I think Matt Brown, mainly due to style purposes, and Condit has a new opponent, obviously. So I think it'd be a really good fight, and I don't want to see Matt Brown miss out on a big fight because he's basically earned it. You know, he's put on some really solid performances against some really good fighters. You know, he's beat a lot of the top 20 guys. You know, from the 20 to 11 guys. So he really deserves a top 10 opponent, a really decent opponent, and it'd be sad to see him miss his shot. And Saffiedine, if he is going into the top 7, I like to see Matt Brown versus Saffiedine next.
2 seconds, I'll let you know the rankings just now. At the moment, before the fight, Saffiedine was ranked at 10. Brown's at 8. Ellenberger 5. Lombard's down at 13.
Well, there we go then. Brown and Saffiedine makes sense. It's 10 versus 8. Well, obviously, it's like 7 versus 8 now or something. Or 7 versus 9 if that pushes Brown to 9th.
Yeah.
Possibly.
Any of the fights really would be quite good.
Okay, that's a wrap for today's show. As always, thank you for watching. And be sure to check out more MMA Crypt Fighting Talk over on our YouTube channel, MMA Crypt.